S&P and its ilk were a species that money held in exceedingly low regard. Long before the financial crisis of 2008, Wall Street had derided the rating agencies as hubs for intellectual mediocrities, the clock punchers that banks and hedge funds had passed over. Then, in the bubble years, the big banks' financial engineers became expert at duping the agencies into blessing their dodgy mortgage securities, mostly by burying the agency's leaden-eyed analysts in self-justifying math. After the securities turned toxic and the agencies were justly vilified, their pleas of ignorance sounded all too plausible. Many of the S&P analysts weren't even based in New York. One of the men tasked with rating trillions of dollars in U.S. government debt worked from an office in Toronto. Now, Geithner spoke to the credit raters with thinly concealed skepticism. A few days before the meeting, S&P had warned Treasury it intended to downgrade its outlook on U.S. bonds, the first step toward withdrawing the AAA status that stamped the bonds as essentially riskless. Geithner made clear he wasn't begging S&P to change its mind. The feeling inside Treasury was that if S&P moved ahead with this decision, the company would embarrass only itself and not the U.S. government. In this vein, Geithner simply informed the visitors that his country's economic performance had exceeded expectations on almost every measure S&P claimed to care about. As for the one where it lagged, the deficit, Geithner pointed out that the president had proposed cutting this by $4 trillion that very morning. Truth be told, Geithner might have offered these comments a bit more humbly. While the economy had indeed outperformed S&P's most recent predictions, it was still far from healthy. Some 14 million Americans were out of work, and the unemployment rate hovered above 9%. Millions had seen their homes foreclosed on or were in danger of defaulting on their mortgages. This was no doubt the work of the worst financial crisis in 80 years. But it was also the result of throwing too few resources at the problem. The administration's $800 billion stimulus package, while critical, had been too small to lift the economy out of its rut. Struggling homeowners never got the help they needed to crawl out from under mounds of debt. At the moment Geithner spoke, the economy was close to stalling, with growth puttering along at a mere 1%. About the only part of the economy that resembled its former self was the financial sector, where the traders and bankers were approaching their pre-crisis level bonuses. There had been plenty of resources for them. The combination of these factors had arguably produced the worst of all worlds for the Obama administration. A country that took one look at the languishing economy and another at the recovery on Wall Street, and concluded that its government had put big banks ahead of ordinary workers and homeowners. And so a populist backlash that had initially targeted Wall Street increasingly took aim at Obama. Generously, the S&P officials didn't point any of this out. Instead, the de facto spokesman for the group, a mustachioed fellow named David Beers, confessed that the agency was mostly concerned about the prospects for bipartisan compromise. Beers and his colleagues didn't think Republicans would take seriously the president's plan for shrinking the deficit by raising taxes and scaling back programs like Medicare and Medicaid, whatever the theoretical overlap between the two parties. At this, Geithner became somewhat dismissive. He asked how S&P could handicap a political debate in Washington. It was a rating agency, after all, not a polling firm. "It's not your comparative advantage," the secretary said. Then he gestured toward the Obama officials seated on either side of him: Jack Lew, the White House budget director; Neil Wolin, the deputy Treasury secretary; Bruce Reed, the vice president's chief of staff, and explained that all of them had been top aides to Bill Clinton during the last standoff between a Democratic president and a Republican Congress. "We said, this is the way it worked in the 90s, recalled one administration official. "After a big election, when you have divided government, you fight a bit, then find a middle ground." Another recalled arguing, "When both sides had firmly committed to a goal and the public was in support of it, it eventually had to happen." The message was unmistakable. Trust us. We've done this before. It was, in many ways, the message the Obama